Hi, I'm Andre. I'm a co-founder in Catch a Deal. Being a Tech in Asia subscriber feels like as if you're going back to a community. It actually will expose them to the industry standards, get to know more people, and then get out there more. Yeah, I encourage them to subscribe into Tech in Asia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining Tech in Asia and Huawei this afternoon to talk about how brands can win consumers in today's competitive mobile app market. We're going to dive deep with insights and trends that are driving app developers, brands, consumers, communities across APAC. We'll learn about how Huawei Mobile Services, HMS, is building an app ecosystem, and we'll hear real-life lessons and examples from our panelists on app development life cycles, from development to growth to maintenance and monetization. We have some incredible guests with us here today, but before we begin, my name is Andrew Baisley. I run Tech in Asia Studios, the multimedia arm of Tech in Asia. We create content and events just like this one to help connect and inform the Tech in Asia audience. A few housekeeping items. Please feel free to chat, as I see many of you have, and connect with other attendees. We'll be leaving plenty of time for Q&A today, so if you have any questions, please tab over to the questions tab and put those there. You can also vote on other people's questions, so if there's something you really want answered, please make sure to do that. Now I'd like to invite all of our panelists on stage while I introduce them to you. Our first panelist is Jonathan Defensor de Luzriaga. Jonathan has been the president of the Philippine Software Industry Association for the past 6 years and has contributed immensely to the country's growth and development in the technology and innovation sectors. Jonathan is a staunch supporter of the startup movement in the Philippines and has successfully launched several startups of his own. Jonathan is also one of the guest judges at Huawei HMS App Innovation Contest, Apps Up 2020. Next up, we have Ross Veach. Ross is the CEO and co-founder of WeGo, an online travel marketplace that provides top-ranked mobile apps and websites for users living across APAC and MENA. Ross is a veteran of the Asian internet industry, having established Yahoo's Southeast Asia operations in Singapore way back in 1998. And not to age you, Ross. And he's been leading product development efforts across the region for more than 6 years. Ross is an active angel investor in technology and been in the technology sector for more than a decade and enjoys working with other passionate entrepreneurs. Finally, we have So-Young Kim. So-Young leads the marketing and communications for Huawei Mobile Services across Asia Pacific, focusing on growing the user base of the HMS product suite, as well as building the app developer ecosystem for HMS. Prior to joining Huawei, So-Young spent 2 years at Facebook, where she led the thought leadership campaign Zero Friction Future. During her 10 years previously at Google, she focused on mobile marketing and content strategy. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Ross, thanks guys. Ross, Jonathan, let's start with you guys. The mobile app market is really competitive and it's kind of relentless, to be honest. When entering the market might be an easy thing to do, surviving and growing is really a big concern for any brand, entrepreneur, app developer. Ross, why don't we start with you? From your experience, how do you combat competition in these app marketplaces?
Sure. So, like in any marketplace, I think the first thing you want to make sure you do is have an awesome product that is resonating with your customer base. So, assuming you've ticked those boxes, then thinking about you need to figure out the best way to connect with your potential customers, which is where sort of app store marketing comes into play. So. At WeGo, we're targeting a fairly wide user base. Essentially anybody who's booking their travel online, which is the way we think about it is anybody where your household income's above about 5,000 US a year. You're traveling, and these days, unless you're a bit of a dinosaur, you're booking it online. There are some people still booking offline, but most people are online. So that's a fairly broad audience. We've been around a while, actually. So WeGo was founded way back in 2005. when we first started, there was no native mobile apps. We're a purely desktop web business. So we've sort of gone to where our user base have been booking their travel. So these days we're very much mobile app first. Everything gets designed for native mobile, then we adapt it for the web mobile, then we adapt it for desktop. So that the priority's been flipped. And we spend more time and more money on app marketing now than we do on web marketing. On the app side, some of it's paid, some of it's earned. A lot of the obvious things you can do to stand out in the app store are actually free things, right? So just making sure you've got awesome an awesome listing, making sure you've got great screenshots, videos, make sure you're speaking in right tone, right language for the audience you're targeting, and go where your users are, right? So we got a lot of users on Huawei phones now, so it makes total sense for us to be partnering with Huawei across all the different platforms they have.
Yeah, that's helpful context for us. I think there's a bunch of topics there we'll want to dive into. Jonathan, what about from your perspective at PSIA? How are your association members kind of in combating the competition in these marketplaces?
Well, thanks, Andrew, and thanks for having me here this afternoon. I was just about to say after you dated Ross, he looks very, very young. Let me. So again, the PSIA is an association composed of about 160 of the biggest and most significant software development companies here in the Philippines. And when it comes to the creation of apps, most especially in product development, we're not very strong when it comes to that, to tell you the truth, because the Philippines is quite known for IT services delivery rather than product creation. But for those 5% or so of my community that actually make products, mostly mobile products, or at least a huge chunk of them would do both. The usual traditional, promotions, such as creating a killer website, social media. They go heavy on public relations. Store optimization is very important. You need to find an app name that's quite unique. But I think where most of the people are struggling is really in the product market fit. Treat your mobile phone as a very valuable piece of real estate. So if you're into product development, you have to ask yourself, what would encourage me to actually download something from the store to actually put into my phone? If you could answer those questions, I think you're treading the right track.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, So-Young, how about from the perspective of Huawei? Obviously, the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store are two major discovery and distribution channels. But developers and brands, companies have found it increasingly difficult to achieve visibility in these stores. What kind of benefits do you think a new App Store environment has to offer for it to be considered a viable option to developers?
So I think there are maybe two options that we need to bring to the table as kind of the player who's jumping into the app market at later stage. So I think one thing is obviously the incremental download. Every app developer actually wants more download. So when they're deciding about whether I need to invest my time and effort to put into my app to this new app store, they will need to think about, can I get the incremental download and then incremental users, right? So I think that's going to be the first thing. And then the second thing is the technical support, because they may need some support from Huawei side or any other app market whenever they have some issues in integrating the kits. So I think for the incremental download part, what we are currently working on from Huawei App Gallery store perspective is making things a little more easier to discover. So because we are the start, we are just catching up with other markets. So obviously, we have less saturated market right now. So discovery of the app itself is naturally easier. And also we have the collections such as editor's choice. So we can host some of the feature apps, some of the hidden gems to be featured in this collection. So people can take a look at the kind of preview of the app before downloading. right? And then decide to download. So this, and also we have some promotions towards the users to drive some app downloads, and also the in-app purchase. So we throw in like, lucky draw kind of promotion. When you download the app, you can do the lucky draw to win some Huawei gadgets, or you can also do the in-app purchase and get some cash rebate or Huawei points rebate. So these kind of promotions actually help more users to come to Huawei App Gallery and then download the app. And then I think this will bring some incremental, download to the developers as well.
Got it. So it sounds like for developers that thinking about incrementality is key. I think, Ross, from your perspective, do you think when you look at all of the app stores that you're pushing out your apps into and the users that you're trying to reach, is saturation a big issue for you? Do you think that there's room for this quote unquote third front of a third app store?
Well, I think there's saturation within the within most app categories, but there's definitely not saturation within the app store as a category, right? So there's effectively pretty close to a monopoly on each of the main platforms today, right? So you've got the monopoly on App Store if you're an iOS user, and there's a virtual monopoly if you're Android. And Huawei's effectively trying to turn Android into more of a duopoly, or at least bring a new offering to the table. And like in all things, I think competition is inherently a good thing. So we're happy to support them in their efforts. I think competition is good for consumers. To have a choice of app stores. There's lots of different ways to run an app store. There's lots of different ways to curate. There's lots of different algorithms you can deploy to help surface to users apps they may not come across otherwise. Huawei's got some really good big data science people, and I'm sure they're applying some of their ML wizardry to the task of surfacing apps that you wouldn't otherwise come across. There's advantages to both be running the EMUI, right? So there's advantages to running both the App Store and the skin on top, so that you can surface within the skin opportunities, apps that the user might be interested in. I think if you look at some of the recent controversies going on in the world of app stores, I think there's definitely room for innovation and somebody to come in with a fresh approach on the payment side. It doesn't affect us, we're a free app, but there's a lot of people out there charging either to download or in-app, and if Huawei can come to the table with a new offering, I think it's going to be developed warmly by a lot of developers. I would note that Huawei's getting a lot more aggressive very recently. Every time they push a firmware update, so the App Gallery becomes the default. So what we've noticed at WeGo, we're seeing a lot more downloads and updates coming through the App Gallery now. So if anybody hasn't had a look at their the analytics around where their users are getting their updates from, I encourage you to go and take a fresh look, because I was quite surprised. So it's from our point of view, it's more important than ever before that there's a totally up to the minute release available in the App Gallery, that all the artwork is up to date, and I think for a lot of other app developers, the same would be true.
Yeah, so maybe it's not even so much a third front, but it's a third option that's here today.
Sure. Yeah. I think the reality is today it's going to be a second option for Android or Huawei users. But I suspect if the Huawei guys do a good job of it, it's going to be a second option for all Android users, in the fullness of time. We'll see.
So let's talk a bit about the birth of Huawei App Gallery. I know that the journey began in China in 2011, but it became global, I think, only in 2018. What were some of the challenges that Huawei faced in going global outside of China?
So I think to begin with, it's like really the language barrier is the starting point, because Huawei started the business in China. So the apps that we had in the app market was also mainly Chinese language apps, right? So as we enter the outside of China and then international market, then we need to actually cater to the needs of the local users, meaning that we need to have more of the local apps and global apps in their own language. So that's been the first challenge that we had as we entered the international market. So to actually tackle that, we are having this local strategy. So what it means is that we try to onboard the local apps, so popular local apps in local language, which cater to the most of the needs of the local user in each country. And then also as well as we go for the global top apps, because that's more for the convenience. Many people will use certain apps to make the easiness of their daily life. So that's also what we are looking for from the global side. So this local strategy helped us quite a lot so far. So as you mentioned, it's been only about 2 years since we started the business outside of China with App Gallery. And then now, by August this year, actually, we have 490 million monthly active users with Huawei App Gallery already.
490 million, wow. Sorry, you called the going local global?
Yes,
did I hear
local.
That? I like it. That's cool. Jonathan, how has Huawei's global strategy of going local, how has that impacted your association members in the Philippines?
Well, first and foremost, Huawei Philippines has partnered with the Philippine Software Industry Association to create more mobile app developers. And they've, to Ross's point, they've been very, very aggressive in attacking the market. I'm looking at this from 2 angles here. So first, just to tell everyone, I'm actually part of the board of judges for the Apps Up contest, which is an initiative under Huawei's $1 billion Shining Star Global Program. These are for talented developers across the region, where they could come together to showcase their capabilities to stimulate innovation. The registration period is actually open, and this will be open until the 8th of October. About 20 winners from APAC will win the prize pool worth about $400,000 US. Now, that being said, aside from all of these, from this major contest, we've also had several runs of developers bootcamp. And for us, it's quite interesting because, from the PSIA standpoint, it's actually a geographic market share play for us, primarily because we've been catering traditionally to the US, to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, certain parts of Europe. We've had very little traction in terms of providing IT services from the Philippines, except for Japan. And now with this new platform, this opens up a totally new market for the Philippine technology innovation sector. And another point that I would really want to drill down on is the fact that when we create all of the talent pool in the Philippines is relatively young. So it's about 23 to 33, and that's going to remain that way for the next couple of years. And most of them are gravitating more towards mobile app development rather than web applications. And last but not the least, along the same lines, is really in terms of the partnership that we have with Huawei right now. I think is relatively going to become stronger as the years progress. And to Suyong's point, we're talking about 400 million plus, and that's a market that we've never seen in the Philippines before.
Yeah, really interesting. I guess it helps the ecosystem that you're building to have the support on the ground locally with the team members involved in the development, not just of applications, and helping you access these 490 million users on the platform, but also being a partner to develop the ecosystem.
Well, without actually stretching this too much, but the Philippines is also strong on the BPO sector for particular reasons. language here, as far as Western nations are concerned, is not a very huge issue. So Japan has known this for quite some time, that they're using the Philippines to actually, they're using the Philippines as a springboard to penetrate Western countries. And I think Huawei is going in the same direction and trajectory in capitalizing on the talent pool that is the Philippines to create more apps for, specifically for Western countries.
God, that's really insightful. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit to kind of what the developer experience is like in building for HMS and App Gallery. So Ross, why don't we go back to you? I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about the development journey of WeGo. I know its origins are all the way back to 2005. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the shift that you experienced and the experience that your developers had implementing HMS and putting the app into the App Gallery.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I was saying before, so we used to be a sort of a web-only company. We've kind of had to learn the native app game. And when that first came along, it was an important platform. It's actually funny. It's like to look back on, but initially we had our web guys have a crack at it. That didn't end well. Then we tried outsourcing some of the native front end development and sort of using our back end guys. That didn't really work very well. And then we eventually figured out we got to hire people who've done this before. We went headhunting in the gaming industry and found some people who spent years optimizing to the the nth degree to get the bit of performance out of their gaming engines, and we brought them in, and we found that was a winning formula. So since then we've been operating at fairly high level of output, I think. In terms of HMS, I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, HMS is Huawei's equivalent of GMS, so it's the services layer that you need to write to access things like location or mapping or any of those things that the sort of abstracted from the silicon underneath. So if increasingly, if you want your app to work on a Huawei phone, you need to be able to write to HMS and support it. So we did this about a year ago, I think it was now. And it was relatively painless. So I think we got a proof of concept done in half a day. It was actually at a Huawei developer workshop. We sent a couple of the team along, and then we had something ready to actually be pushed into production after a few days. So it's relatively simple. If you're an app developer, app owner, you haven't tackled it yet, I encourage you to do so. It's relatively simple, and the way we did it is, rather than sort of have two different builds, one for GMS, one for HMS, we have one APK, so one build for both. We sort of detect which of GMS, HMS the phone supports, and then we just have code that supports both running in the app. So regardless of where somebody downloads the WeGo APK, it's going to work. So regardless of what your phone is. And that was relatively simple. So I'd encourage people to take that approach. It doesn't add too much complexity or too much size to your APKs.
It sounds like also your developers joining that Huawei workshop was maybe a reflection of that Go Local strategy, just access to that in the first place.
Yeah, so this was in Singapore, but I'm aware Huawei had these all around the globe. So we had some guys go along in Dubai as well, and they were holding them in Europe and other Asian destinations.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good point. So I understand WeGo started obviously in MENA, the Middle East, North Africa region. You've expanded really rapidly into APAC with something like 40 million downloads. I don't know if that number has grown since we last talked. What strategies did you employ as an app developer, someone putting apps into the market to power that growth? And was there any? And you kind of touched on this before, but like, what was the effect of expanding out into the Huawei ecosystem?
Sure. So just to correct the history a little bit, Andrew. So we actually started in Singapore. So, Southeast Asia was the original ambition. So we're a little bit, actually we're way too early for online travel in Southeast Asia in retrospect. So we globalized. So we, to use the Huawei term, we sort of localized our products and our apps. We realized there was a massive opportunity untapped in the Middle East, and we've kind of been mining that for best part of the last 7 or 8 years. And that's sort of a real focus for us now. We're effectively dual headquartered Singapore, Dubai. So we leverage Singapore for all the technology and the talent and the opportunities here. And Dubai is our commercial hub for the MENA region. And we've got great partnerships with Huawei out of both hubs, Singapore and Dubai. So Singapore Singapore KL is the axis for technical support and for APAC market exposure, and then Dubai is the same for the MENA market. And so we've worked with Huawei, both regions, and across a couple different opportunities. The really turned the lever for us was when we started preloading. So when we're looking at so the genesis of this, we're going through our analytics trying to look at which phone manufacturers, which phone models were over-indexing in terms of the e-commerce returns we're getting. And Huawei started releasing more and more high-end phones. They were really popping off the top of our charts. So we engaged Huawei, got into a conversation about preloading the WeGo app initially in the MENA region, and so that has worked really well. And then based on the success of that, we've expanded into India, selected models in Southeast Asia, and when people are actually out of lockdown and free to travel again, I'll let you know how that's going in Southeast Asia. But so outside of the preload, we've been doing a lot of marketing in the App Store itself. So there's a sort of a pay-per-install platform that our performance marketing team are actively engaged in. So there's some good opportunities there, and good tools to use. And my brand team is working with the Huawei team. We're doing co-marketing. So Huawei brings to us a lot of interesting opportunities, and where we sort of enthusiastically contribute to them. And then on the product side, we do a fair bit together as well. So we like to push the boundaries of the platforms, and so Huawei often comes to us and says, we're releasing these new features. We'd love to find some way to showcase them. And more often than not, it's a good intersection between what we want to build, what they're trying to showcase. So we're always happy to lean into that.
It's awesome, Russ. Those are really good practical tips, I think, for developers that are listening. Jonathan, I want to go back to you. I think launching apps on different app stores is clearly a growth strategy that fits probably a lot of brands and developers' go-to-market strategy, but it also presents lots of challenges around distribution, support, maintenance, analytics. How would you recommend that developers and brands tackle this with confidence?
Well, first, there are platforms like Flutter, for instance, that you just have to code once and it basically publishes in different platforms. I think that's going to be hopefully within the game plan of Huawei, so that it's not going to as individual companies, we don't have to invest on different types of people with different types of skill sets. I think that's going to change a lot with the kind of aggressiveness of special Huawei handsets that Ross has mentioned a while ago. You cannot disregard creating apps on Huawei's platform, primarily because the handsets are selling like hotcakes, and I'm actually using one of their handsets, and it's pretty damn impressive in terms of features and power and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that you can't overlook if you're into app development, primarily because the market share is really aggressively growing. Hence, you have to put it in your roadmap in terms of product development. It's plain and simple as that, Andrew.
Yeah, just get it on the roadmap and do it. And as Ross talked about, the actual integration itself, even if you're doing it directly, not using a sort of third-party translation layer is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Ross. So the feedback that I got from the Filipino developers who actually attended the boot camps and the workshops, it's so relatively easy. So again, I'm not the best authority because I'm what they call the dreaded software executive. But for those people that I've mingled with that do the real heavy lifting, it's not difficult at all.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's 490 million active monthly users, right? So
that's good motivation for you. So
it is, yeah. Okay, so just a quick reminder to our audience: if you have any questions at all, please go over to the question tab and put those in there. We would love to take a look at those. But we'll continue here for a couple minutes before we go to those questions. So, I want to go back to you. How do you think that brands and companies and app stores in particular should continue to innovate to provide a polished user experience that can keep customers kind of coming back for more?
Okay, so I think this is actually for same for our app store, App Gallery too. So it's applicable for any of the apps store or apps that's out there. So I think there are maybe two things. One is the app experience itself, what is the user experience like in-app, right? So we need to actually ensure the user experience within the in-app is really smooth. It's really giving the information that people need so that people can come back to look for this app again. So one thing that I can recommend everybody to do is just look into the analytics data. I think Ross actually mentioned this in his previous answer, right? How he found this business opportunity was actually looking into the analytics of his own app. So I think for the user experience itself, I think it goes the same. So you need to look into the analytics and then see where does the drop off happen, or what are the most killer functions, and then maybe you can leverage your app with that information. So if there's anything lacking, then you need to fix it. If there's certain functionality that people really like to use and then use it again and again, then maybe you can strengthen it. So I think that looking into the analytics data and then adjusting your app is one thing. And then another thing is maybe look into integrating machine learning kit, and then that's something that the machine learning can actually do the find the pattern of this and then give some answers to you as well. So I think this can help to offer some personalized solution for your users when they're visiting your app. So I think improving in-app user experience is one thing, and then second is just to expand the touch point so that you can remind people to come back again and again. So I think that's why people are doing the marketing and then advertisement, right? In-app or on the media channels. So I think that's one of the things that you should consider. But at the same time, as Ross mentioned, I think there are a few other channels as well. For Huawei specific, we have preload. So when you preload the apps, meaning that your app is going to be already in the phone, when you purchase the phone. So that's one thing. But there are other Huawei Mobile Service products as well, such as Assistant. So I think every phone now have this assistant functionality, so people should know what it is. So when you go to the assistant, then in Huawei Assistant, we actually have some apps pop up as recommended apps, or these are the apps that you usually use. So I think syncing with that Huawei Assistant can be one thing. And then another way also, if you are running any entertainment related apps, then you can also consider putting your content into Huawei Video. So I think there can be a lot of other touch points that you can actually think of other than the advertisement. So I think these are the things that they can think of. So yes, focus on the user experience and then also increase the touch points to reach out to your users to remind them to come back to your app.
That's really interesting. So developers should really be thinking about this not just as a entry point for a customer to download their app, but it's really an integration with an entire ecosystem that their customer is living within, and then how to develop that great user experience around that ecosystem.
Yeah, because I think now smartphone is where everybody's just using all day, all night, right? And then within this one smartphone, as real estate, as I think Jonathan mentioned. There are so many other touch points like that didn't exist before, but now is available as the marketing channel. So I think that's something that I would like to encourage all the developers to consider.
Got it. Got it.
Actually, just on that, just to see on
yeah, of course, yeah.
So if I can, so when HMS was first launched, right? So I think the ambition was to quickly, get parity with what with GMS. But I would encourage any developer to check out the HTC keynote from last week, where basically walking through all the new APIs and services that are available via HMS today, and it's come a long way in 12 months, and so there are a lot of new services that you can write to do all sorts of interesting things. So if Huawei is a significant part of your user base, I think that's totally worth the time. I think you're going to be surprised, how many APIs there are to take advantage of now.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's probably a lot of, these things happen fast, right? So there's probably a lot of features that are coming out that people, if you're not really on top of it, you're probably not aware of. Ross, I want to stick with you. You cater to some very different audiences around the world, and they have very different preferences. How do you ensure that your app is relevant to those different audiences, that you are investing kind of resources and energy in thinking about content diversity, discoverability of your product? Like, how do you think about that at WeGo?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, we are in 80 countries worldwide, more than 20 languages now. So it's a pretty important question. So for the markets that are most significant, we are in the market. We have native speakers from the market who are helping us, tune the product, making sure it's translated, localized just right, and that we're marketing. We're talking to people in in the language and in the places that are most appropriate for them. For some of the sort of secondary markets, we're doing some of this remotely, but still trying to do as much of it with native speakers as possible. We use a lot of data science, so if we had somebody from the UAE coming to Singapore next week looking for a hotel, and we had somebody from Indonesia coming to Singapore next week, if it was actually possible, they would have very different tastes in hotels, and so we would surface stuff that was our data sets told us is going to be more likely to be booked and more likely to be relevant. So for years we've done a lot of personalization at that sort of like country level. We're now sort of taking it to the next degree and actually personalizing it. So trying to figure out more about you as an individual, and then sort of figuring out how to personalize the homepage experience, and then all your shopping experience all the way through, and then taking the same insights and applying it to the marketing we're doing. So whether we're trying to attract new users, or whether we're trying to get existing users back into the app. Online travel is interesting. I've been going along to online travel conferences for more than a decade, and people have been talking about personalization for the whole time. But in reality, there's very little of it actually being done. So most people sort of take the same approach we have. It's like figure out what the Malaysians like, in aggregate. But it's quite exciting to be actually taking it to the next level with personalization. But to your question about localization, so we've got some good translation frameworks in place that allow us to easily create new pages, new features within the app, to hand translate what we want to get just right, and then to put out to a network of freelancers what we need help with. And then for really bulk stuff, which is of only tertiary importance, we'll use some machine translation for that. One of the big complexities we had to grapple with is when we went into the Middle East, so dealing with the Arabic as a language. So we got to go flip everything from right to left. Yeah. Back in the day when we first tackled it, that was a lot harder than it is now. So fortunately, Android has come a long way, so it's a little bit simpler. And as long as you set up your app right, it's relatively easy. So a lot of the heavy lifting is now taking care of that for you.
Got it. Yeah, these are, I think, really interesting problems to solve. But Jonathan, from your perspective, are Filipino, mobile app developers thinking about the global stage and content diversity and discoverability in a global sense?
One of the things that we're trying to push as a message to the entire IT community here in the Philippines is really think outside of your smallest unit here in the Philippines is called the barangay, right? Think outside of your barangay and think of, a much larger set of customers. And to Ross's point, it's a difficult nut to crack. And I think the time factor is really, really important, Andrew. Your time to actually from product ideation all the way to publishing. When I cut my teeth in the industry, there was a very popular saying that was floating around. It said, perfect is the enemy of good, right? So it's never going to be 100%. So just get it out there, get as much customer feedback as you can, and then iterate as fast as you can, because that's how you're going to get your real product market fit.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so Young, I want to go back to you. I want to talk about kind of what's next and look to the future a little bit. You're starting, and although you're a couple of years into this journey now, but you're starting against Google and Apple. Is Huawei determined to play at the same level?
Same level? Yes, we should catch up, right? So we are really start at the starting stage compared to those two giants who are already there. But what we need to promise to our users is that we need to provide the best user experience it can be to our Huawei users, right? So that's why I think we need to put all the efforts to bring all those apps available to App Gallery and then give better user experience whoever who comes to App Gallery as well. So that's something that I think we can promise as the Huawei as the brand. And I think maybe one thing that I can just highlight, because given the audience is mainly the developers, I think they will also have some questions. Then what kind of support can I get from Huawei as the developers, right? So one thing maybe I think the one that actually Jonathan mentioned, App Sub contest. I think that's one thing that I would like to highlight. Because that's actually ongoing contest, and then the good thing about it is actually there's a funding. So when you actually win as the the HMS app, so you integrate HMS kit into your app, and then you got selected as the best apps, then you will win the funding, which is I think really attractive, because that's going to be really help you with the development cost and then kind of stuff. And then even if you don't win, we are still giving away some the cloud storage and that kind of stuff. So still, I think I would really encourage the developers to look into that option to leverage this. So this kind of contest will be, here and there. This is really a big one because it's a global one, but we'll come up with some smaller scale of the regional or local ones. So that kind of developer supporting, I think programs will be ongoing. And we are also building DGX Lab in Singapore, so that's going to be open soon. So in this space, what you can do is you can actually test out all those new HMS kits, and then also you can see the newly launched HMS Huawei devices as well. So test out, do the debug, and then also meet with our technical experts to get the support. So that's all going to be available from DGX Lab. So I think that's another thing that we are planning. And then once this space is ready, I think it's going to be, ready in a month of the time. Then we can also prepare more of the educational program as well, such as training, and also we can shoot some webinar and then make it available on the developer website so that people can get the necessary information in time whenever they need some help. So I think those are the things that we have. And then also, I did mention that we have the local technical support team. So when you have when you encounter the technical issue while integrating HMS kit, then actually we have people sitting in the local office to help with these issues. So I think those are the things that I would like to highlight.
Wow, I think this is a super exciting opportunity for any developer. I'm not even an app developer, and I'm going to maybe consider go making an app. Okay, Ross and Jonathan, I want to give you guys a chance to speak directly to Huawei here and briefly, because we want to go to Q&A, but briefly tell us, let's start with you, Ross, on what do you think from the perspective of your business that it will take for Huawei to get there?
Yeah, I'm now having my pen and note ready.
So I think if you want to run an app store these days, you need to dedicate sufficient resources to protect users. So protect them from apps that are going to crash, apps that are a security risk, apps that are a privacy risk. So I know, having dealt with all these teams at Huawei, I know how seriously they tackle this. So I think that's essential these days. If you think back to the early days of Windows, when you're downloading software and running it, without the benefit of a sandbox, nobody wants that on their phone, right? So it's important that Huawei does that on behalf of users to make sure everything we download is safe. I think there's lots of innovation to be done in terms of the way you can curate and surface new apps for people to try. I think there's an opportunity to build some sort of affiliate ecosystem around showcasing apps. So, tap into all the influencers on all the different platforms of the world, and incentivize them to do in-depth reviews of apps and to drive people to download and install them via Huawei. I think there's an opportunity there. For developers, I would love it if you would be a bit more open with data telling us what's happening in the app marketplace. So a lot of us spend money with third parties like App Annie or the other data guys to try and figure out what's happening in the app stores. You've got the data, so I think without infringing on any app developer's privacy, there's a lot you could tell us that would be useful. So things like, so how does our travel app compare against, give us benchmarks against other travel apps in the same countries, right? So whether it's monthly actives, daily actives, crash rates, uninstall rates, all of these things, it would be great. And actual download data, right? So or download and uninstall data. Everybody's relying on extrapolated data from rankings scraped by third parties, right? There's no reason I think you can't publish that. And I would partner up with a team of analysts who can turn it into interesting stuff for people like Tech in Asia to write about. Maybe even partner with Tech in Asia to write about it. There's lots of stories.
Thanks, Ross. This is I know. Speaking for Soyeon, this is welcome feedback and helpful, and I'll give her a chance to respond in a second. Jonathan, what about from your perspective? Like, what are the things that you think Huawei should be focused on in the near term to get, really get there and operate on the same level as other app stores?
So I cannot reiterate the importance of the support, as Soyeon has mentioned. As we go through this journey, especially this being a relatively new platform, it's important that there's a face to a name. We put it down to a level of personalization, and I think Huawei has invested heavily in its presence here in the Philippines, and that's a step in the right direction. The second one is that, as I mentioned earlier, we have a very young workforce, and these are very hungry individuals in terms of learning new stuff. So the more you feed them, the more that, for lack of a better term, the more they're going to be addicted to doing stuff on your particular platform. So I guess that's quite important. Aside from the stuff that Ross has mentioned already in terms of privacy and data that we could basically share just to get a better feel of the land. I think one of the things that some of the other tech companies that have significantly found some traction in the Philippines has done is really penetrated the academic institutions and made it as part of their curriculum. The second piece is actually in terms of allowing those that are already out of the academe to have better access to different markets. because as you know, it's a challenge for us in the industry to orient our developers and our software development companies to actually think a little bit wider and bigger than what's happening just within the four walls of the country.
Thanks, Jonathan. So Ian, any last thoughts before we go to Q&A?
No, I mean, I took down the notes, Ross, Jonathan. Thank you for the feedback, because we are far from perfect, right? There's no perfect app store, but at the same time we are again at the starting stage, so there are a lot of things that we need to further improve to better serve our developer community as well as our users, consumers. So all feedbacks are welcome, and then I think you will see more and more effort and then more and more programs coming out from Huawei to actually build this ecosystem with the developers, so that we can better serve our consumers who are using Huawei devices and more.
Thank you so much, Soyeon. Okay, we're going to go to Q&A. There's still time if you want to get in a few questions, although we're a little tight. So our first question here is, I'm just going to pop it up on the screen, is from Heislik. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, from Kuala Lumpur. Is there any developer education or upskilling program that's designed by Huawei or plans pertaining to that?
Okay, so I think I can take that question. So we mentioned this many times in the panel discussion already, but one thing that's going on and then also covering Malaysia is App Sub Contest. So please look into App Sub Contest. You can search for it and then get the information there. So that's, I think, one of the things that you can tap into. This is the contest that you can integrate HMS Kit and then be the part of the win the part of the funding that we have. And then in terms of education and then engagement, so we are actually planning of it right now. So I did mention about this DGX lab. It's not really located in Malaysia. It's located in Singapore. But I think the content that we are going to create there to educate the developers will be available online. So regardless anywhere that you are based, still you can use this content to educate yourself. And plus, also we are also having some of the local events, but this is just in plan, right? So I don't have exact date when or where this is going to be happening, but in each country we are actually planning to have some of the code labs or small training sessions so that people can actually join and then right on the spot learn about how to integrate HMS and kind of stuff. So you can stay tuned for this both offline and online opportunities for education.
Awesome.
Andrew, let me just add a little bit more to Soyeon, because my own company, Spring Valley Technology Corporation, is actually partnered. I have a segment called Spring Valley Academy. And we're partnered with the Huawei Academy, which has a ton of free stuff for everyone to just get into the portal, and they could just swim there technically.
Awesome. That's great. It's really nice to see so many resources available to developers that need them. So that's great. Okay, we're going to move on to Kaisian Lim ask, considering the large investment and the time going unprepared for mobile app development may prove to be costly and may not yield any positive outcome. How can we leverage app stores for better financial benefit? So I think this is about, maybe Ross, you have some perspective on this, but this is about going headlong into the app world. How should a developer kind of hedge their risk, especially in terms of developing a new app store?
Okay, good question. So we find it quicker to prototype stuff or to get MVPs done in on the web than native. So maybe that's one way. So depending on what you're trying to develop and for who you're trying to develop it, maybe that's a strategy. So use progressive web app technology and wrap that, distribute that, see what sort of reaction you get. It's not going to give you the optimum native experience, but maybe for what you want to do, it's good enough to give you the signal you want back from the audience to see if it's going to resonate or not before you commit months and months or thousands and thousands of dollars marketing it.
Yeah.
With paid performance, typically, you can spend, if you spend a little bit, you're going to get a general idea of what it's going to look like in terms of unit economics, at scale. Typically, it gets worse as you scale, so you need to spend a reasonable amount to get a feel for it. But yeah, I mean, figure out the fastest, most cost-effective way to get an MVP out into the hands of real users and get real product feedback. I'm a big fan of actually, doing prototypes that are sort of interactive. There's lots of good tools for doing that, and then sitting, people down in front of them to give you feedback. Get them to click through it, try and do a task before you've even started coding. So again, if what you're developing, is suitable for that, I'd encourage you to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. We do that here at Tech in Asia, and it's very illuminating. Some things that you would think are very intuitive to us maybe don't make sense at all to anyone else. So that's really important.
Yeah, as a former product manager, it can be quite humbling sitting there in a group or usability lab watching people struggle to get months to go.
That is true. Okay, I think we have time for one more. I'm going to go with Dini Utomo. Ask, how is Huawei supporting developers with tech support? It's pretty crazy to manage the entire marketing and developing end-to-end for a small startup. So I think, So-Young, this is probably more about, so we talked a bit about the resources on learning about HMS and getting support for like that first step. I think this question is more about like ongoing technical support, ongoing support for startups.
Okay. So I think maybe I can just briefly cover at the very high level about what kind of support or offerings are available from Huawei side, right? So I think to begin with, we have all those universal resources available from the website. So I think that's going to be the starting point of getting all the information about what to prepare or how to integrate HMS into the kit. And then we have DTSE team sitting in each country. So DTSE is short form for Developer Technical Support Engineers. So these are actually engineers who's doing the job. So these people are kind of available resources to help with those technical issues that people may have in terms in the progress of the integrating HMS kit. So I think that's one other source. And in terms of marketing, we have the solution, right? But it's going to be how can I say? It's going to be one of the solutions that you can tap into, because Huawei, advertisement or Huawei App Store is not the only marketing solution, right? So when you uploaded your app to Huawei App Gallery, then of course there is top banner or flash screen, those kind of the marketing assets that you can actually top up to drive more of the downloads. So that's, I think, one asset. And then also recently we have launched Huawei Ads Network. So you can actually, target your advertisement into our mobile network, advertisement network side. And good news is that actually is performing pretty well right now because we just started. The competition is less. And you know that mobile advertisement is always about the competition because it's the bidding, right? So I think that's one other thing that maybe you can look into to kind of reduce the marketing cost. Yeah.
Wow. So a little bit of a secret tip for anyone watching to get into that app marketplace. Okay, thank you so much, So-Young. Thank you to Jonathan, Ross, So-Young. We're just about out of time. I really appreciate you all generously sharing your experience with all of us and with Tech in Asia's readers. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So wait, before we go, if you enjoyed this event, please consider subscribing to Tech in Asia Live. Tech in Asia Live is a new subscription option from Tech in Asia that gives you access to live sessions, workshops, and all of our conferences, including our upcoming flagship tech conference happening in October. We have a limited time offer here for $59 per year. The original price is $99 per year. So there'll be a link posted in the chat if you'd like to avail yourself of that. Thank you again. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you from Tech in Asia, from Huawei, and on behalf of our guests for joining us on how brands can win customers in today's competitive mobile app market. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.